So now that you've been introduced to this next project of ours, creating a synthesis prompt of your own, I wanted to provide you with this additional resource video, sort of just walking you through those initial steps as you're getting started doing this. I know that last year when we were in the classroom doing our first workshop, students had a lot of questions, needed a lot of support as they got started. So since we are not together right now, hopefully this video of me walking you through initial steps will help a little bit. If not, remember, I'm just an email away. I'm happy to Zoom with you one-on-one if you need it. Just let me know. So we've gone over what the expectations are here. And you know that the synthesis prompt is going to have to be inspired by the choice book that you've read for this unit. So that is the place you'll start. Remember, on the actual prompt, on the template that you now have to fill in, right? Remember, only the things in yellow are the things that you have to fill in. Everything else is standard and stays the same, which is great for you. So you're going to have to come up with the issue. And since that's the case, you have to think about your choice book and think about what issue that is. So you have the template or the planning sheet here. This is optional. You don't have to use this if you don't want to. You can just use notes, but it does direct you to where you want to start. What are some potential issues I could focus on? So you can kind of brainstorm some. So if I'm going to model this, I am going to talk about a book that I read, not recently, but it's one that's on my shelf that I could use here. A lot of my other books are at school. So it's called The Genius Inside All of Us. And so David Shank, he makes this argument that really we all have this untapped potential inside of us, and it's a mix between kind of nurture and nature. It's not an argument against the two. It's how they kind of work together, how the genes we have and the environments we are in can work together for our benefit. And sometimes we need to seek out different environments, better environments to almost activate those latent genes that maybe are that piece of our genius. So knowing kind of what the central idea of the book is, that's where I would start. If I would go back to my issues sheet over here, and I would want to type in what are some things I could talk about. Well, do I want to enter the nature versus nurture debate? Like maybe, but it's not really about that. But I'm going to put it down on my brainstorming sheet. Do I want to talk about anyone can be a genius, like that idea, the idea of intelligence, fixed versus growth. That's the whole Carol Dweck growth mindset idea. So I know there'd be a lot of information about that. And so that's something I'm thinking about too, as I'm jotting down my ideas of this kind of controversial issue that's going to be the central, argument or idea for my synthesis prompt. I have to make sure it's going to be something that's going to be accessible, and there are going to be other resources that I can pull. Because remember, you have to find 5 other resources beyond your book that you're going to use. So I could do something like that. I could maybe play with like impact of negative environment, or maybe positive environment. Maybe I want to focus on that more specifically, right? Can you actually get out and find success if you're surrounded by a negative environment in your youth, or vice versa? Can you make poor decisions with a positive environment around you? There are enough excerpts in this book that I could go there. And as I'm brainstorming, I'm sort of just seeing, are any of these, really calling out to me? Do I really want to do one of them more than the other? And I can brainstorm for as long as I want, but as I was doing this, this idea of, can anyone be a genius? I like that idea of a controversial issue, a controversial topic to maybe try. So I'm going to try it. And if I go back to my book, I first need to make sure that I can find a passage in the book that's going to showcase some sort of side to that argument, right? It's going to give me perspective on that idea. So in this book, within the first, chapter, they do talk about this idea that we need to get rid of the nature versus nurture debate and instead they talk about it here. It says it right here. We need to replace nature/nurture with dynamic development, and they give some examples of how dynamic development works. So I might say, you know what, I'm going to copy from here, or maybe I might even start over here. The great irony of our endless efforts to distinguish nature from nurture is that we instead need to do exactly the opposite to precisely understand precisely how they fit together, how they interact. And so I might start up here. Maybe I copy all the way down, to the end of the chapter. That's actually about a page. If I were to copy it, I could paste it right onto my template. That would be source A. So my last name, I would put the author's last name, Schenk, and then I would paste it here. I would say the following is an excerpt from a book, blah, 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 The Genius Inside of All of Us. I'd put it here. I do have to make my citation up here. So that's why on this planning sheet, I gave you this planning chart, because you could put all that source information here, which would make it really easy for you to use, the EasyBib add-on and do an MLA citation, because that's all those are, is MLA citations. And on this side, remember, you have to present, sources that show a variety of perspectives on this issue, so students can take whichever position they want. Some should be, supporting one side, some supporting the other, some a little bit more neutral. So you can just, remind yourself over here what angle the source is taking, just to ensure that they're not exactly the same. They should not all be exactly the same. So you can kind of keep track of that here if you want to. Again, you don't have to, but I could put that all down here. And now I sort of have the basis, the essence of what I want to do. At this point, I would want to go back, and I would probably want to see if I could start to draft what the issue might be. I've given you lots of examples. You've already done 2 synthesis prompts yourself, so you've seen how they present an issue. So you have to address this issue, show the controversy here. I would have to say something like, intelligence, how intelligent a person is, has been an area of interest for everyone, from scientists to parents, right? I might say something like that, and talk about there are folks who believe that intelligence is fixed and not not able to be changed. People kind of have this cap, have this ceiling of how intelligent they can be, while others believe that our minds are pliable and there's no limit to our growth, and we're our only limits based on what we're willing to do. And I can kind of explain that here very quickly, so that I can present this issue. And I would then say very concisely, that their assignment is to develop a position, that either defends, challenges, or qualifies, maybe the likelihood of us all having the possibility of being geniuses, or something, that wasn't well said, but you know what I mean, something like that. I would pop that right here. So again, if I'm walking you through this process, you saw that I started with, what could my issue be? I found an excerpt from my book that could work. I would go back here and I would probably draft what I might want to say here. And then I have that done, which is really what I want you to do first. I really want you to try to get that done for early next week, for Monday of next week, so that I know that you've picked that. That's the hardest part. For some, I guess for some it was the easier part, because from there, you then need to start doing your searching, right? Your research. You're going to look around and think, how can I find other sources that actually show this issue? And again, show a variety of positions on this issue. So as I was thinking about how I might start my search, I might just it can be as simple as going to a search engine, right? Going to Bing, to Google, the main virtual library, certainly. And I just typed in, can anyone be a genius? And I might just click through my first couple of hits here just to see, this one's Live Science, that could potentially be a good source, not sure, right? This one is some kind of, health article, but again, these are kind of .coms. I might want to change and go over to Google Scholar just to get articles that maybe are a little bit more vetted. But again, if you look at some of the sources that you've used on the synthesis essays you've had so far, some of them are just from like common websites, and even one from the honor code was from a girl from her high school. She wrote that report. So as long as you know that it's pretty solid, and this one is talking about on PBS and what Stephen Hawking is doing to test out the idea that anyone could be a genius, that looks pretty interesting. I would probably click on it. I would read through it. I would remember that my sources that I'm posting on my synthesis prompt cannot be much longer than a page. Like they really shouldn't take up much more than a page. Students have to read 6 of them. So you got to be mindful about that. And you can always excerpt it. You can always say this is an excerpt, and you can certainly excerpt it with like an excerpt that's continuous, or if there's something at the beginning and something at the end, you could put the ellipsis in between. So I would probably read through this and decide if I wanted to use any or, any of this, because it looks pretty long. And maybe Inside the Brain of a Genius, maybe, I don't know, I'd have to read through it and decide if I thought that it fit, and then I would post it on. And as I'm doing this, I might realize that a lot of the hits I get with Can Anyone Be a Genius are supporting the same side, and that would not be good. So then I would have to go to the other side, and I would say, what if I just search specifically for my opposite side? I want to see, has anybody written about the fact that intelligence is fixed? And again, I would kind of see, there's the Center for Educational Neuroscience in the UK. That might be worthwhile. I might click on that. A couple of different articles that speak about, the Psychology Today, right? Maybe I'll click on that. But again, these are saying not, and that might not be helpful for me because I don't necessarily want all of my articles to show the same thing. So I would have to figure that out. I might just have to find a different way to say, I think I actually read this one, and it does sort of show that even though you can change your intelligence, like you have to have sort of like the perfect storm and the perfect recipe for what's around you for it to really make a difference. So I might use that, which is toward the end, which isn't saying that it's totally against my other position, but at least it's giving perspective. And that's what you really want to try to find, are sources that are giving your issue perspective, different perspectives that your students, that whoever's going to take this prompt could actually pull from and argue something that's a little bit more complex. And then as I'm doing this, I might think about things that I also know that relate to this and might help me in my search. So as I was doing it, the idea, Malcolm Gladwell's idea, the tipping point, or I think it was that book. I've read all of those books. The idea that like the 10,000 hour rule, you've heard Dan and Shay's very famous song Now, I'd spend 10,000 hours to pretty much get you to love me, or, to show you that I love you. And that comes from this idea of the 10,000 hour rule that, anyone could be, expert at anything. It just takes 10,000 hours of practice and investment. And there's this article here. I might say, I wonder if that's true. And I wonder if there's, articles to prove both of those sides, because that relates directly to this. And look at that. There is one. There's one, the Smithsonian magazine, that is actually saying it's not real. That's not true. And so I might click on that. And I might decide, you know what, I do want to use this. Sorry, it's taking a little bit, but I might want to use this article or a piece of this article because it does play to a little bit of a different perspective, like I mentioned before. So I'm sorry if this was a little bit long or involved. It was not my intention. I just wanted to walk you through the process that you would use to start building your synthesis prompt. So if I decided to use any of those sources, I could put them right here. I could put the source information here. Even if I just wanted to put the link to bookmark it for now, I could always go back to it, but at least it keeps everything in a nice organized spot. So you could do that. And, I could remind myself that I do have varied sources by what is the position that they take. And I would, on here, I would start to paste them in. I would paste in what I want to use in each source. Now remember, you do have to have one source that is some sort of visual, just like you always see a comic, some type of photography, a painting, something that's visual. One source has to be visual and suggesting something on your topic. The other source has to be data, some sort of chart, graph, some list of statistics, some sort of data. It has to present data, and it should not be text heavy. These are 2 sources out of the 6 that should not be text heavy. Because students only have time to read all 6. They only have 15 minutes. So both of those are not text heavy. So you might have to actually specifically search for charts on the topic. And so I hope going through this and kind of walking you through the process of how you might start to fill this in is helpful. Just remember, you are going to have to fill in everything that is highlighted. Though that is what you have to fill in. The things that are not highlighted, you do not have to change. You're just filling those all in. You can certainly take a look at the example creation prompts from last year that I shared. Those were ones that students did really, really well on, got A's on. So hopefully that gives you some guidance too. They kind of look just like the prompts you're used to. And I think that's it for now. I hope that this was helpful, and just let me know how I can support you as you try to finish this for April 27th. See you soon.